So good morning and welcome to Yoga Over 50, coming to you from Blue Point Yoga Center in Durham, North Carolina. My name is Lynn. So today what I have in mind to do is a little bit with the adductors, the muscles that move, the hip muscles that move your legs away from the midline of the body. And they're important for stability, whether you're walking or standing or balancing, all kinds of things. So we'll give some special attention to them and also to stretching the opposing muscles. Did I say adductor? Abductor. It's the abductors that go out to the side. And we'll balance that out by also giving some attention to stretching the adductor muscles, which are the ones that draw your legs in toward the center or across the center line of your body. Just talking to Sarah about not making things driving yourself crazy by trying to make recordings letter perfect. So that's a good example of that. The abductors move your legs away from the center. The adductors move them toward the center. So we'll begin lying down. Do a few things lying down that we'll then repeat in the other orientations. So let yourself recline onto your back any way that is comfortable for you. You could have your legs outstretched, or you could have your knees bent and your feet flat, whatever works. In any case, take advantage of the opportunity to stretch across the top of the chest. So let your palms turn up toward the ceiling. You could have your arms out to the side, kind of an A shape, or they could be further away from your body in a T shape, or you could bend at the elbows and have your hands up toward your head in a kind of a cactus arm, the saguaro cactus position. Whatever seems comfortable. If your hands don't want to come down to the floor, maybe you've got a little tiny pillow or a little fold of towel or something that you could put under them so they have a place to rest. If your hands are resting rather than hanging out in space, then your shoulders and your arms will be able to relax more comfortably. Similarly, if you have your knees bent and your feet flat, if you move your feet a little bit farther than hip width apart and tip the knees in toward each other so that they can rest against each other, that tends to be more relaxing to all the muscles around the hips than if they have to be at work to keep your legs upright. Of course, if you have your legs outstretched, they can just rest on the floor, allowing the toes to roll to the outside at whatever is a comfortable angle. So settle in here. Bring your attention inward. Close your eyes or let your gaze be unfocused. Bring your attention to your breath. And follow the movements that your torso makes as you breathe in and you breathe out. I'm not going to do anything to manipulate the breath at the moment, just noticing. So see if you can notice that the whole torso participates in breathing, all the way from the pelvic floor up to the throat, to the front of your body, which is probably obvious, but also to the sides and also to the back. And below the waist as well as above the waist, because even though the lungs are above the waist, the abdominal contents have to move up and down, both above and below the waist, in order to get out of the way as the diaphragm descends and the lungs inflate on an inhale. So you inhale, the diaphragm descends, the lungs expand, the abdominal contents move down in the pelvis, the muscles around the pelvis expand to make room, the pelvic floor descends a little bit. And on the exhale, the pelvic floor rises a little. The muscles of the lower part of the torso gather in. The diaphragm contracts and comes back up into its domed shape under the ribs, and the lungs expel the air and are smaller than they are when they're inflated. And at the same time, the abdominal contents have jogged back up to take position above the waist, as well as below. So just breathe in and out a few times. Maybe you can think of the pressing down of the pelvic floor as you breathe in and rebounding as you breathe out. Maybe you can feel the pressing of the lower part of the hips into the back as you breathe in and a little rebound as you breathe out. Maybe you can imagine the abdominal contents happily jogging down lower in the belly as you breathe in and jogging back up a little higher as you breathe out. Jogging up and down is actually very important to the health of the whole intestinal system. Keeps it happily moving your food contents along through the digestive system. And now we'll just leave the breathing apparatus and all its associated movements to do its job and turn our attention to some other things. Fortunately, being able to rely on the unconscious aspects of breathing to just keep ticking along. So let's do a little just to warm up the legs. So moving one knee at a time, bring the knees in toward the chest. Use your hands on top of the kneecaps to draw the knees toward your body. And on an inhale, let the arms straighten. Keep the hands on the kneecaps. Let the knees float away. On an exhale, draw them back in again. Let's repeat that a few times. This actually gives a little jogging motion to the intestinal system as well. And then with the legs just comfortably, a comfortable distance from your body, use your hands to stir your knees around. You can let them move synchronously, or you can let them move in the opposite direction, go one way around and then the other way around. And whichever you chose at the beginning, either the synchronous or the moving away from each other, then do the other one. So if you're moving your knees synchronously in a circle, you probably feel your hips also shifting from side to side. Pretty much hard to move the legs without also having the torso kind of roll around. It's all right. We'll just let it do that. And then let the feet back down to the floor and bring your right knee, your left knee toward your chest. Yeah, left. I'm just remembering that I'm not mirroring. And just put the hands lightly behind the thigh. You can use a strap on your foot if you prefer, and let the knees straighten, mostly anyway, and press the heel up toward the ceiling. So we'll take a bit of a stretch out of the back of the leg, maybe a little flexing and pointing through the ankle. And then on an inhale, let that leg come down to the left side. You can put your hand on the outside of your left thigh if you're not using a strap to support the leg, just to assure it that it's not going to be lonely out there in space. And put the right hand on the right hip. So we're moving that right leg away from the body. The knees are still pointing straight up, straight out now, kind of back behind you, and the toes back behind you. And with the right hand, you keep your right hip from pulling up off the floor. And then on an exhale, use the abdominal muscles and maybe your hand as well to return that leg back up to the center. Push your left foot away from you to straighten the left leg along the floor if you haven't already. And then let that, sorry, that's the right leg I'm talking about on the floor. And the left leg crossing the midline of your body, but keeping the back of the left hip on the floor. So maybe it doesn't come across very far. That's all right. And then bend at the knee and let yourself roll up onto the right hip. So taking a little rotation through the spine here, stretching the arms out from side to side. And then use an exhale to roll yourself back to the center. Set that left foot on the floor. Oh, I'm confusing myself worse by not mirroring. And then on the next exhale, draw your right knee in towards your chest and give a little squeeze in. Put the hands behind the thigh. Let the knee straighten, raise the heel toward the ceiling, lead out with the heel there. Make a bit of a stretch, a little pointing and flexing at the ankle, bringing the toes back toward the shin and then pointing them away. And then either using a strap or using your right hand on the outside of the right leg, let the right leg come out to the right, put your left hand on your left hip, keep the left hip anchored down. If you stretch out through the left heel, it helps to keep that side of the body anchored. Taking a bit of a stretch out of the inside of the right leg here. And then use an exhale to draw the right leg back up toward the ceiling and let it cross your body. Not very far because you want the right hip to stay down on the mat here. Keep leading out with the heel and then bend at the knee. Let yourself roll up onto the left hip so the right leg comes further across with the knee bent, and you have a little rotation through the spine. You could look out toward your outstretched right hand if you like. And then use an exhale to come back up to the center and let that foot drop to the floor. We'll just keep it there and bring the right foot in as well. So now both knees are bent. We're going to bring both knees in toward your, and then straighten both legs up toward the ceiling so that the legs are overhead, or maybe they're a little away from you. If this is uncomfortable too much on the abs, you can stack your palms facing down under your sacrum to make a little elevation to the hips. So now we're just going to let both legs come away from the center line. You can put the hands on the outside of the thighs. Give them a bit of a stretch, lead out with the heel. The toes are pointing directly back over your head. Now the knees are pointing that way too. Excuse me. And then on an exhale, and maybe using the hands with a little support, bring the legs back up to the center. And now we're going to bring the legs just moderately apart, maybe just a couple of feet apart. And now we're going to move the legs in circles. You can just let the feet relax. So we're just going to circle the legs out of the hip joints. They're going to go asynchronously. So both feet go out and then in, and they come a little closer to your body and a little further away. So we'll go one foot's going clockwise, the other foot's going counterclockwise, and then we'll reverse them. So now the foot that was going clockwise is going counterclockwise, and vice versa. We're going to do this in a prone position a little later, so I thought we'd just get the idea of it here. And then bring the legs back up to the center, maybe take a couple more pointings and flexings, and then let the knees bend, bring the knees back in toward the chest, give them a bit of a squeeze, stretch out along the lower part of the back, and then stretch the arms out to the sides in a T shape, and let your knees sway from side to side. You don't have to come all the way down to the floor here, just whatever is comfortable at this point in the day. Use the abdominal muscles to move your legs back up through the center. And then after you've gone an equal number of times to each side, just roll yourself over onto one side, pause for a moment, and then use your arms to push your body away from the floor and come to a hands and knees position. Or if you prefer, this will work perfectly well with forearms instead of weight on the hands and the wrists. So set up with the wrists or the elbows under the shoulders and the knees under the hip joints, and a long straight line of the back. And let's just have a little mobility for the back here, exhaling to bring the hips back toward the heels, letting the small of the back round a little bit, and inhaling to come forward. A little bit of traction of the heels of the wrists or the elbows toward the knees to open along the breastbone, and then exhale back again. And inhale forward. And exhale back. And inhale forward, and this time from the small cow back, keep coming forward, bend at the elbows, take a little dip down on an exhale, and inhale back up. And exhale to roll back to the child's pose and forward again. And if you're on your forearms, you're not going to be moving quite as far, but you can still roll forward and back. The dipping is a little more problematic if you're already on your elbows, right? And back to the hands and knees. And now let's bring the left leg back behind us. So we'll stretch it straight out. And lead out with the heel, point the toes directly down toward the floor. See if you can stay as centered as possible here. So try not to shift over toward your right side. And then begin to walk the right fingers out. Maybe the fingers stay on the floor. Maybe the hand stretches out by the ear, palm facing in. Set that pair back down, and we'll go to the other side. Stretching the right leg back, toes pointing down, keeping the body centered. Letting the left fingers stretch out, perhaps raising the left hand alongside the ear, fingers facing in. Set that pair back down. And we'll go to the first side then and bring the left leg and the right arm out. So we're stretching long in the center, keeping everything well centered. And then on an exhale, we're going to bring the leg out to the side and the arm out to the side. The palm faces down on the right hand and the toes face down on the left leg. So we've got the leg abducted now, and we'll bring them back to the center, stretch them long once more, and then set that pair back down. Take a break whenever you like. If your wrists need a break, take a kneeling position or a child's pose to give them a rest. We'll go to the other side, bringing the right leg back and the left arm out. On your next exhale, bring them out to the side, toes point down, the palm points down. Keep yourself as centered as you can here, even though you've got this bigger lever arm on everything. And then we'll inhale to come long to the center again, a long stretch from the heel to the hands, and exhale that pair back down. And exhale, take a little rest back into child's pose. You can let your body rest onto your legs. If your head doesn't come down easily, you can stack the palms, stack the fists to make a place to rest your head. If you're resting comfortably, you could bring your arms alongside your body or over the small of your back. And now bring your arms back out to the front. Plant your palms so your elbows are going to be up off the mat. Think of a long, long stretch from the back of the hips up through the fingertips. On your next inhale, just raise your body slightly and walk your hands over to the left so that when you press down with your right hip and your right hand, you'll feel a big stretch on the right side of your body. See if you can keep yourself facing down toward the floor, so you might feel quite a stretch under the right armpit. And then on your next inhale, walk the hands back through the center and now walk them over to the right and press down on your left hip and your left hand, again, keeping the shoulders kind of parallel to the floor so that you feel as if your left shoulder is trying to come down closer to the floor. The big stretch there. And walk back to the center. And now, starting from a centered position, reach your left arm out to the left. Make enough space to thread that arm under your right armpit so that you can turn your body to rest on the left side of your head and the left shoulder. You could stay right there, pressing into the back of the left hand, or if you like, you can take your right arm around behind your waist toward your left hip, drawing the right shoulder back for a little more twisty position here. Continuing to breathe, however, and if you're not resting on the floor and you have a little pillow or a folded blanket handy, you could rest on that instead. And then if you've wrapped your arm, bring that right hand back out.
So you can press into it, make a little space to extract your left arm back out to the side, and then replace it out in front of you. And then we'll bring the right arm out to the side, create a little space to thread that right arm under the left armpit to come down on the right side of the head and the right shoulder. Again, fill up that space with something handy. If it doesn't rest comfortably, you don't want to be kind of hanging uncomfortably out in space. You press through the back of the right hand and through the left hand to turn your torso a little bit more. And if you like, you can take your left hand and wrap it around behind your waist toward your right hip, drawing the left shoulder back behind you for a little more twisty position here. Keep breathing, of course. And bring that left arm back ahead of you, the hand to the floor. Make space to extract your right arm, bring the right arm out, and roll yourself back up to a hands and knees position. And let us come to a seated position now. So if you like a little something under the hips to sit on, a roll of blanket or a block, you could get that now. Let's just sit cross-legged for a moment. Put your right leg in front and or on top of the left for the time being. Sit with a little forward roll of the sits bone so that you can have the natural inward curve at the waist part of your spine. Let your shoulders come back over the hips. Lengthen the back of the neck. A little shrug up and down to the shoulders. Let them settle toward the back of the body, away from the ears. Elbows hang close to the sides. Just take a few breaths here. Let's inhale the arms up overhead. Take a little twist, turning toward the right leg. Sorry to be turning away from you. Just let your arms go along for the ride. Draw back with the right shoulder. You can turn the right head a little bit. And then we'll inhale back to the center and let the arms down. And now we're going to recross the legs so that the left leg is in front or on top at this point. And we'll resituate with a little forward roll of the pelvis. Tall spine, shoulders back over the hips. Shoulders down away from the ears, elbows close to the body, long in the back of the neck. And then we'll inhale the arms up overhead, and this time exhale and turn it toward the left. The arms just go along for the ride. Left shoulder could draw back a little bit. The gaze could turn back toward the left shoulder. And we'll inhale back to the center and let the arms down. And now I'm just going to turn to face you again. So we're going to bring the legs out to the front in the staff pose for a moment. If you find that your small of your back tries to round when you have the legs extended, having a little bend to the knees would be a fine thing to help the pelvis roll forward so that you can sit in a comfortably tall position here. We'll just give a little pointing and flexing of the feet. And you can take your hands behind you, draw the shoulders back, create a small back bend in the upper part of the back here. So you can turn your gaze up just a little bit toward the ceiling, drawing the shoulder blades toward each other in the back. And then come back to an upright position. And with just a little pressure on the fingers, just tip yourself slightly forward. Just feel a little tip in the pelvis here. Let's turn to the side a moment so you can see that what I'm doing. I got to get my hands out of the way. I'm going to put them. Okay. So I'm going to sit and just tip a little bit, not very far. The hamstrings don't want me to go very far, and I'm keeping the whole spine long. No rounding of the spine here. Okay. And then from the legs right out in front, we're going to abduct the legs. So move them away from the midline of the body, still with the
hips in a neutral position at the hip socket, in the sense that the feet are pointed straight up toward the ceiling and the knees are pointed straight up toward the ceiling. So we just move the legs out away from the midline. So we can take a little stretch here. So if we do that same tenting of the fingers, broad across the front of the chest, tall spine, and give just a little pressure, but just feel a little rolling of the pelvis as if it was kind of rolling between the legs. And you might feel a little extra stretch in the inside of the thighs along the muscles that bring your legs together. And just do a little bit more of that. Just a few of those, just experience that. And then bring the legs back together. And we are going to come to a standing position. So you take whatever method works well and safely for you to get up away from the floor. And slowly stand up so you don't get lightheaded. And we'll come then to a standing mountain position. So find the joints of the hips by locating the hip points, going a little in, a little down. If you wave your knees in and out, you'll feel where the joints are. And line up the legs and the feet along those same points with the toes pointing mostly forward. Adjust for your body configuration, of course. And we'll stand tall here. So you might find that a little movement of the hips back toward the heels is a good thing. Relaxes across the back. You might feel a little outward traction at the heels will relax across the small of the back. Turn the palms forward a moment to create a broad chest. And then let your arms relax at your sides. Lengthen the back of the neck so you have a long line all the way from your tailbone out through the crown of your head. Super. Okay. All right. So now let's do a little movement. So we'll inhale the arms overhead, exhale, hinge forward. Let the hands slide down the legs, keep the spine stretching long. Think of the pelvis rolling forward like it did when you were in the staff pose. Give a bend to the knees, sweep the arms forward, straighten the legs, raise the arms overhead, bring the hands together and exhale the hands to the heart. And then we'll bend at the knees, the hips and the ankles so that the knees go out over the toes. Still have the mountain spine. It's just a little bit of an angle now. Still have broad shoulders. If you bring your arms out to cactus arms, you can feel the breadth across the top of the chest. Take a breath or two here. And bring the hands together, press through the feet. Inhale the arms overhead as you straighten the legs, and exhale the arms down to the sides. Okay. So now I'm going to turn to use the long side of my mat and move my legs away from the midline of the body. So now my legs are abducted. So now I need the ability of the adductors, the muscles on the inside of the legs, to give a little stretch here. So take a comfortably wide stretch, and we're going to do a little forward folding here. So if your hands don't comfortably come to the floor with a straight spine when you forward fold, you might like some big fat books or possibly a chair seat to rest your hands on. So I'll just bring a chair seat over here in order to be able to demonstrate that. I could bring a big fat book over here too. That makes an acceptable block substitute. So I'm going to step my feet quite wide apart. I prefer to have my feet on the mat to avoid slipping. So you stand so that you can put your feet on your mat. And then I'm going to hinge forward from the waist. Not from the waist, from the hips. where the hip joint is. So keeping the spine long. And then if your hands don't come to the mat without bending the spine, put them up on a block or put them out on a chair so that you can keep your spine stretching long with its natural set of curves rather than rounding the back. So now we're going to take a little bend of the knees. I'm going to face forward because I think you'll be able to see what I'm doing better that way. So still keeping the spine long, let your hands go and take your book or your chair with you so that you can walk your hands over toward the left and let the left knee bend with the knee going straight out over the toe. You can leave your right foot planted on the floor, still pressing into both the inside and the outside edge of that foot. I should have reminded you of that before we got here. And feeling a bit of a stretch out of the inside of that right leg, right? So if the right leg's going to be way out to the side like that, the muscles on the inside of the leg have to let it go there. And then we'll walk the hands back through the center and over toward the right foot, letting the right knee bend in the direction of the right toes. Now taking a stretch out of the inside of the left leg. And you can either leave the foot flat on the left leg or you can roll up onto the inside of the left foot. And then we'll straighten the knee, walk back over to the left, bending the left knee again. And now roll onto the right heel and draw the right toes back toward you. So now your knee is going to have rotated a little bit up toward the ceiling and the toes with it. Different stretch out of the inside of the right leg. And then set that foot back down with the toes pointing straight forward and walk the hands back over to the right, bending the right knee, and then roll, raising the left toes away from the floor. They go up a little toward the ceiling, the knees up a little toward the ceiling. Different area of stretch out of the inside of the left leg. And set the left foot back down and walk the feet back to the center. Center your weight into your feet so that you can bring the hands back up to the hip creases, give a bit of a bend to the knees, squeeze the thighs together as you raise your spine all as one unit to come up away from the floor. And then walk your feet back in, take a little break from having your legs out to the side like that. I'm just going to move these props out of the way so I have space for what I want to do next. Who uses their dictionary much these days, except perhaps as a yoga prop? Okay, so let's take another legs abducted position, but this time we're moving the legs out to the side and also externally rotating by turning the toes away from the center. So we'll have a little goddess pose here. So rotate your legs out to an extent that's comfortable so that when you bend your knees are going to go straight out over your toes. So don't demand too much here out of the hips. So we'll stand tall here in this wide-legged position and take a wide-armed position too. So stretching the arms out in a very wide V, so we're making kind of like a big X shaped with the body. And then we'll bend at the knees, the hips and the ankles, and at the elbows to sit into chair pose. You could sit into a low chair pose, in which case your feet have to be quite wide apart, or it could be much less bend to the knee and the feet less wide apart. Whatever works. And then we'll press through the feet and inhale back to that big X shape again. This is a great, strong looking, if you're a small person, it makes you feel very large here. And then we'll sit down into goddess pose again. Draw the elbows a little behind your body so you have a very broad chest. Press into both feet actively. press into the balls of the feet. Maybe put the weight into the balls of the feet. Maybe the heels can come up off the floor. Keep breathing. And exhale, let the heels come back down. Straighten at the knees, stretch the arms wide, and then lower the arms and walk your feet back in underneath you. Okay. So now we're going to do a couple of balancy things that involve the legs being abducted to the side. And sometimes there's we talk about the glutes, but really it's a whole family of glute muscles. And there's one in particular that runs along the side of the hip that often gets kind of neglected, but you need it when you're going to bring your leg out to the side. So if you start doing this and you find that you're getting really a lot of back chatter from the side of the hip, just be moderate about it. So be kind to your body. So we'll stand in the standing mountain position and then shift the weight into the left leg, drawing the left hip underneath. So we're using the muscles on the side of the leg for stability. And we'll bring the right leg directly out to the side. So the knee of the right leg is pointing forward, the toe of the right leg is pointing forward. And we're going to raise the left arm. So we've got this long line from the standing foot on the left side up past the left side of the ribs, out through the left fingertips. And the right arm just can lie passively on the extended right leg. Shift most of your weight, as much of your weight as you can, into the left leg. You're going to have to lean off to the side a little bit, but just be aware of that. See if you can avoid too much shifting over, and then see if you can use the muscles on the outside of your right leg, right hip, to pick your right foot up off the floor. Maybe just briefly, that would be fine. Just pick it up and put it down a few times. Or you can pick it up and hold it there. If you're picking it up and holding it there, a little flexion at the ankle helps to keep that leg active and make it not such a burden on the rest of the apparatus. So just be mindful about the strain that might be arising either in your left hip that is supporting you or in the right hip that's holding your right leg out to the side. And don't give them too much work to do, but some work. And then we'll let the foot come down, the arm come down, and come back to a centered position. And just pause there a moment, back in the symmetrical standing mountain position, to observe how your body feels from side to side. And then we'll do that standing balance on the other side. So shifting the weight into the right leg, drawing the right hip in toward the center, makes the left hip hitch up a little bit. Don't worry about that. We'll stand the left toe off to the side. Again, toe points forward, knee points forward. We're just abducting without externally rotating. We'll raise the right arm, create a long line from the supporting foot on the right side up through the right fingertips. Head stays in the center. And now we could shift the weight further and bring the right foot up off the floor perhaps, or maybe not. Maybe just shift the weight, but leave a little toe down on the left side for a little extra stability. Again, thinking of staying as near the midline as it's possible to do, given that you're standing on one leg here. Again, if you've got that left foot lifted, giving a little flexion through the ankle will help to make that leg mind its own business. Keep breathing for sure. Just kind of monitor how the muscles are doing on the outside of the right hip and the outside of the left hip. You don't want them to get all cramped up on you. And then we'll come down to the center and let's just take a little loose bob up and down, relax things a bit. And now I want to do a more dynamic balance that involves bringing the legs out to the side. So let me just see how I can do this without walking out of the camera range. So we're going to walk back and forth, shifting the weight, lifting one leg out to the side, and then placing that foot right behind the front foot. You could place it immediately behind, heel to toe, and then roll back through the back foot from the forefoot to the heel. Then lift the other leg out to the side. So we're lifting, not flinging, and then place the heel to toe and roll back. And then when you get to the back of your mat, you'll reverse that process, lifting the leg to the side, placing the heel to the toe, rolling up through the middle of the foot, pressing through the ball of the big toe, lifting the other leg out to the side, placing it in front. But you don't have to make it such a tightrope as this. You could instead leave more distance between the heel and the toe. You could instead not put the foot directly in front of the other one. So just use whatever space you have available. You don't really need the mat for this. And as I said, lift the leg out to the side rather than flinging the leg out to the side. And very deliberately place it down. Pick something to look at. This sounds like it ought to be pretty easy, but it actually gives a bit of a challenge to the balance here. Do whatever you like with your arms. You could bring the hands to heart center. You could bring the arms up over your head, which would make this a little more energetic. And just take a few passes, whatever space you have available. So you're lifting the leg out to the side, then placing the foot on as little or as much of a tightrope as seems smart. Rolling right through the center of the feet. When you're walking backward, you might feel as if your feet are kind of pulling you behind. And then when you've completed your pass, come to a standing mountain position again. Pause there. And let's come back toward the floor. So I'm going to stand in a standing mountain and inhale the arms up overhead and exhale and hinge at the hips. Let the hands slide down the legs. Keep the spine stretching long. Keep bending the knees till the hands can come to the floor. Walk the hands forward and the feet back to come to down dog. Take a bit of a stretch there, pushing away. You can use your forearms instead of your hands and wrists here. Maybe a little pedal of the legs, bending one knee and then the other underneath you. Press back. And now walk your feet apart from each other and we'll take a wide-legged down dog. Just feel that that's different. Like a lot of things in yoga, not very many wrong things, just different things. And then walk your legs back underneath you. Roll your weight forward. You can come to hands and knees or to a full plank, whatever you like. And then lower yourself to the floor, coming to a prone position. Leave your head on straight, resting your chin or your forehead on the floor. Actually, you could use your hands to make a little place to rest your head. So you could bring your hands under your forehead or under your chin. What's comfortable. It's kind of nice to keep the back of the neck long, which I find easier to do if I put my hands under my chin. So now we're going to do what I promised earlier, which was some movements of the legs from a prone position. So when we lift the legs away from the floor, remember that when you exhale, give a little, you'll feel your belly muscles come off the floor. And those are good muscles for protecting the small of the back. So if the small of your back tends to feel kind of crimped, be sure that you gather up those belly muscles to give some support there so you don't take too much of the load into the waist part of the spine. So stretch the legs behind you, make space at the front of the hips. We'll exhale first to gather those abdominal muscles and inhale to lift the legs away from the floor,
just a little bit. They don't have to come up very high. They're just coming up from the hips. So now you probably feel the front of your pelvis grounded down into the floor. And we can let them back down. And then bring them up again. And now we're going to move the legs away from each other and then back toward each other. And away from each other. So the knees are pointing down toward the floor. So we don't have the legs externally rotated. Just moving them in and out with the toes and the knees pointing down toward the floor. And then you can let the legs back down, let your upper body rest completely, bend at the knees, and take a little roll of the hips as your lower legs swish from side to side. And then let the lower legs back down to the floor. I think I have to keep my face away from the floor. My voice sounds funny to me if I have my mouth too close to the floor, but you can just let your head relax. So we'll gather up the abdominal muscles again and inhale and extend the legs behind. Move the feet apart, maybe a foot and a half or something like that. And now we're going to do that circling thing that we did with when we have the legs over the hips. So one foot's going in a clockwise direction and the other one is going in a counterclockwise direction with the feet a little apart from each other and the knees and the toes facing down toward the floor. And go a few times one way and then go a few times back around the other way. You'll probably feel this quite a bit at the back of the hips. And then bring the legs back together and set them back down and bend at the knees and take another generous roll from side to side, or you could swish your feet around in a circle, or another motion that rotates your spine a little bit and relieves that. And now let's bring the hands to the floor, palms down near the ribs, elbows sticking up so that we can press away from the floor and move ourselves back to a child's pose for a moment. And then let yourself back down on your back. I guess we could have just rolled over, couldn't we? With your knees bent and your feet flat in a pre-bridge position, let your palms turn up toward the ceiling. So you'll be pressing into the back of your arms and the back of your palms. And to begin with, set up with the feet at hip joints width apart, knees pointing straight up toward the ceiling, also at hip joints width apart, toes pointing straight away from you, heels fairly close to your bum. And we'll just come up and down in a few easy bridges. So on an inhale, press through the inside of the feet, draw back with the heels, raise the spine away from the floor, all as one unit. Let it down with the brakes on. So it's just gently coming back down. We're not rolling up and down. We're bringing it up and down as one unit from the shoulders to the hips. Press through the inside of the feet especially. Keep the thighs parallel to each other for the moment. And now we're going to walk the feet a little further away from each other. So maybe about to the, so you can feel the edge of your mat, and let the toes point out just a little bit as you do that. They more or less have to point out a little bit, but you still have your toes and your knees are pointing the same direction. And now we're going to do a little bridging here with a more wide-legged posture. So raise the spine all as one unit, set it back down. So notice that we haven't just rotated from the hip joint. We've moved the legs away from the midline of the body. So this feels different, right? Again, not too much right or wrong, just different. Of course, if you feel pain or strain, don't do something that produces that result. There's no yoga pose that's so important that you should hurt yourself on the way there. And then let yourself rest back down
Bring the arms out to the sides with the palms up. Let your knees sway one in, one out, and then back through the center and the other direction. You can turn your head away from your knees. You can let them rest a little bit. Taking a stretch on one side of the body and then the other side. And the next time that your right knee is inward, point that right knee down toward the bottom of your mat. Reach your right arm up alongside your ear and stretch from the right knee up past your right hip, past your right ribs, under your right armpit, out through the right fingers. Take a couple of good breaths there. And let the knee down and the arm down and the knee up. And roll the other way. So the left knee is dropped in toward the floor. The right knee is out to the outside. Point the left knee down toward the bottom of the mat. Reach up through the right fingers right alongside your ear. Take a long stretch from the knee, past the left hip, past the left ribs, up past the left armpit, out through the left fingers. Take a couple of breaths into the ribs on the left side of the body there. And on an exhale, bring the left arm down, the knees back up to the center. Just bring the soles of the feet together. Put your hands on the outside of the thighs a moment. Let the knees fall out to the side. We have a supine bound angle position. The knees on the outside of the thighs just gives them a little reassurance there. Take a few breaths here. Use an exhale and maybe the hands to draw the knees back up to the center. And now situate yourself in whatever sort of Shavasana position you would like. Could be legs up the wall or on a chair, could be on your belly, could be with knees bent or with legs outstretched, in supine position. If you're on your back in some manner, let your palms face up toward the ceiling and let the shoulders be broad, the backs of the shoulders dropping toward the floor. Bring your attention inward once again with your gaze soft or your eyes closed. Take a scan around your body. See if you're holding tension anywhere. And if so, let your breath travel to that place to see if that could dissolve. Let your breath become a little more active. Bring a little movement to your hands and your feet. Wriggling the fingers and the toes, moving the hands and around the wrists and the feet around the ankles. Let the head turn from side to side. Bend one knee at a time to bring your feet flat with the knees bent. Stretch the arms to the sides. Just let your knees loll lazily from one side to another. And then let that lazy lolling roll you to one side. Rest there in a fetal position with your eyes closed for a few breaths. When you're ready to come up, let your torso roll toward the floor as you press with your arms so that your head comes up behind. And take a seated or kneeling position that would be comfortable for a moment. We'll sit as we did earlier with a tall spine, shoulders relaxed away from the ears toward the back of the body, elbows close to the torso. Lots of room to breathe. We'll take an inhale before a closing Om. Bring the palms together, thumbs near the breastbone. We'll inhale first. Thank you for sharing your practice with me today, and namaste.